Please welcome to the stage from Peru, Araceli Poma.
Valicha lisa pasniani Niña chai de veras Mai piras mutanki Valicha lisa pasniani Niña chai de veras Mai piras mutanki Jura y kunabi Niña chai de veras Matata su guaya Hermosa flor de la sierra, jilguero andino, flor de la pradera. Hermosa flor de la sierra, jilguero andino, flor de la pradera. Por valles, montes, quebradas, Cholita busqué. ¿Qué estarás haciendo? Por valles, montes, quebradas, Cholita busqueña, ¿qué estarás haciendo? Saras chaparguay, parguaycha, parguaycha, tricocha, era y cha. Saras chaparguay, parguaycha, parguaycha, tricocha, era y cha. Saras chaparguay, share this thing with Marco. Thank you for that.
Perfect. Yeah, if you guys want to come even closer, that would be even nicer. So, yes, you have asked me Marco. Mi nombre es Marco Avilés. My name is Marco Avilés. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks, Mari, for the introduction. Thanks to the library for the invitation, and also to Words Without Borders for making this possible. Thank you also for bringing me here to New York. It was a very, very great experience. This day being here, I was visiting like different schools in the area in Brooklyn, Manhattan, and I was able to spend a lot of time with other with kids, not other kids, with kids. Like I'm not that young. Just checking the light. Real state. Yeah. So I was visiting different schools these past days, and I was talking to kids, especially about immigration. We did a lot of like writing exercises about how our different like families came to the U.S. and what came up was very, very, very touching. And just to open the conversation with them, I also like shared some of my own stories. So we, okay. So one of the stories I shared was this one. I mean, I didn't talk about how food became religion in Peru's capital city, but I share a little bit of this article. In this essay, I told the story of a very, very good friend of mine. His name was Santos. And when I was a little kid, Santos was my best friend. Can we pass to the... Okay. So this is the geography of Peru. A lot of mountains. If you think of Machu Picchu, for example, Machu Picchu is in the top of a mountain. But my family and my friend Santos, we were born and grew up in Abancay, between Abancay and Cusco. And at the start of the 80s, we migrated from the Andes to Lima, which is Peru's capital city. And you know, Lima is in front of the Pacific Ocean. So this was our first migration. And we got to Lima, and the Lima in the 80s was a different city from Lima now. You know, if you go to Lima, you will see like a lot of restaurants, you know, parks in front of the ocean. It's a beautiful, beautiful city. But in the 80s, Lima was different. It was a sad city. Peru was in the middle of a war. A lot of people from different parts of the country left their towns, especially got into big cities like Lima. So Lima was dark, was dangerous, and my dad, you can think about this, my dad didn't want me to go out. So when I was 3-4 years old, I used to like look through the window, the city was dark, you know, dangerous. And my friend Santos, who lived with us, he used to work with my dad. He was older, he was like 30 years old maybe. He was a big guy, like strong. He used to drive a truck. He every night, you know, when I was going to bed, Santos usually cried. It was surprising to me to see this guy, you know, so older than me, so strong, crying every night. So one day I asked him, Santos, why are you crying? What's going on? And he said, I miss my food. I miss the food from Abancay, and we eat like cuy, like guinea pig. Maybe he missed that. So he was, I think he was trying to say that he missed not only the food, but he missed the land. And my dad didn't want me to go out, but Santos, one night, he said, you know, your dad won't know about this. We're going to go out in secret, so we're going to see what's going on outside Lima. And can we go to the former one? Yes. So we explored Lima, and Lima was, yes, it was dark, it was dangerous, especially the part where we live, San Juan de Lurigancho. It was a part of Lima where a lot of people from the Andes moved. So, and we got to a corner where a woman like this was in front of a grill, like cooking. And the smoke was delicious, and a lot of people were around her. And it was a particular beautiful image of Lima for me, because even though the city was dangerous and dark, there were spots where people got together to have a little like fun, eat a little bit, and remember the places where they came from. And Santos loved these particular spots. So, like, I think he, if I remember very well, I was very, very little. I think he stopped crying once he found his way around Lima, once he started to eat the food he missed. And this is the story that I told to the kids in these schools that I visited. But when I was preparing this talk, I thought, why is this story? Why am I sharing this story? What's particular? What is new in this story for me now? And I realized that I didn't share with the kids one very important detail about Santos. Yes, Santos enjoyed Lima once he found this food, but when things started to get better in Peru, he went back. Can we pass to the other slide? Okay, so he went back. He returned to Abancay. And I think this story is important because that was the first time when I realized that migration was not the end of a story. There was different chapters, and one of those possible chapters was going back. So Santos went back, and not many, but I started to know, since then, other people who usually went back to our original land. Can we pass? This is me when I was 3, and I don't have a picture of Santos, but that little plastic truck was a present he gave me. So yeah, this picture is important to me for that. We pass to the other one. Okay, so now I want all of us to start thinking about return, the idea of return. Why do some people want to go back, and what does it mean? I came to the US in 2014. Okay? I was a journalist, and in 2014 things were not going very good for me in Peru. The magazines were closing, there was not a lot of work in newspapers, so things were very, very hard. And my wife, she is also a journalist, but she is from Maine. She's from the United States, from Maine. She spent a lot of time, I think 10 years in South America, working there, sending stories to NPR, the National Public Radio. But she was kind of homesick. After 10 years in South America, she missed her own land. She missed Maine, and yeah, she told me that she was going back. And I said, well, I don't have work here, maybe I should go with her and see what happens in Maine, right? But yeah, if you're a journalist and you're looking for work, maybe Maine is not the yes, because there are not many papers, So, and also I have to say, to be honest, my English wasn't that good. I mean, I couldn't write in English. So I started doing other things. As a good Peruvian, I know how to cook, so I started working at a restaurant. And we pass to the other. Yep. So I moved. I started working at a restaurant, and still I kept writing, and I tried to sell stories to some media in Latin America. But they were not very excited about my own story. They said, Marco, what's special about your migration? You know, you're a privileged guy because you didn't cross the border without documents, no? So why don't you tell us about your dog? Yes. I used to write about my dog before when I was in Peru, so there were some editors who knew about Piji. So they said, so how is Piji doing? In summer, I said, no, well, Piji's doing great, isn't she? But then summer came, and I think Piji wanted to return, to go back. Yeah, but no, well, we couldn't. We couldn't because as I told you, my wife was also like homesick. She missed her family, and we were like starting a new life in Maine. One thing that I discovered about Maine was that it was very exotic for me at the beginning because Maine, 90% of the population is white. A lot of people came from Ireland, French Canadian. It's very white. But and also a lot of men like to grow their beards. There's a very popular contest in Portland, and I don't know. was strange for my dog. Careless to be there also. But a lot of Mainers actually were returning when I moved there. Friends of my wife had spent some time. They studied and worked in other states of the country. Some of them even went abroad, and a lot of them got married and wanted to raise children in Maine. So they were returning. Not all of them, but a lot of friends were returning to Maine. And I said, well, this is something interesting because I know about returning, about going back. Can we pass to the other? These are some of the stories that I wrote about Piji. Can we pass to them? Okay. So once I felt more comfortable in Maine, I changed the job. I started working as an interpreter for a non-profit. We provided interpretation for Latinos who were working in the farms. My work was driving my little car to farms, looking for Latinos, and ask them. I used to ask them if they needed go see a doctor, and if they did, I drove them to the hospital. So once I felt more comfortable in Maine, I started also to meet other Latinos, and this is particularly important because Mainers, not all of them, but a lot of Mainers will tell you, even people from New York, they like Maine for vacation. They will tell you that there are not many Latinos in Maine. They say, oh, Latinos, they like, the sun, tropical places, Florida. They stay maybe in New Jersey, New York, but no, in Maine there are not many Latinos. But yeah, there are a lot of Latinos in Maine. And usually told me, well, that lobster that you're eating actually was processed by Latinos here in Maine. So they were kind of like two different realities. They were like sometimes like separated. It was, I know this is a strong word, but there's a little segregation in that state. And it's pretty obvious once you start going a little bit outside the touristic picture. And that is very hard because Maine is vacation. Well, I met people like here, Uribio, he's from Mexico, and he was working in this farm, I think 8 years without vacation, in vacation. And Uribio was not only Latino, he was not only Mexican, he was an indigenous Mexican. And one thing that Uribio knew for sure was that he wanted to go back to Mexico. So he worked for 8 years. Trump became president of of the country, and he said, okay, this is the time, I will just pack my stuff and go back. So he went back. He had a neighbor called Maria, and she kind of like did the same thing. She packed all her belongings in boxes, and she usually sent one box every month back to Mexico. When she finished sending things, all her things, she moved back to Mexico. And I also met this guy, Esteban Flores. He was a very, very close friend of mine. He used to work in a egg farm. He used to work like packing eggs. He was 56, and one day he was like packing eggs, and then he fainted. He like passed out. He woke up at a hospital, and they said, well, you have lung cancer. So Esteban, it was pretty bad. I think he lived 2-3 months more, and then died. But Esteban, his plan was also to go back to Mexico after like a few years. He actually, his plan was to work for, I don't know, a few more years in Maine and then go back. And I remember like he used to live in a very, very like small place, and he only had like a mattress on the floor. And all his friends asked him, hey Esteban, why don't you buy a table or a couch, you know, a decent bed? And he said, no, I don't buy any of those, anything, because my home is not here, my home is in Mexico. And in Mexico, Esteban had a very, very beautiful house. He showed me pictures, because he was like always sending money back to Mexico. And he showed me the picture. I'm going to live there in this house, you know, where his wife was. But he couldn't do it. He died, and yeah, he died in the U.S. So can we pass to? So I think to myself, what are these experiences and stories are telling me about myself and about what I do, right? So why some immigrants want to go back? What's the reason? No? What do indigenous immigrants want to go back? No? Do I want to go back? So those are the questions I ask to myself. And you know, in 2019, I started studying a PhD, as Maggie said, in the University of Pennsylvania. And this experience was very, very important to me, because I finally had the time to do like deep research about things that have been there in my head for many years. And one thing that I started to reflect is, how do we journalists talk about immigration and migration? Right? And this is a common image that appears. I mean, this is a beautiful drawing, but we are very focused on people moving from one place to the other. We talk about how people cross borders. You know, they sometimes take boats. It's very dangerous. They cross like jungles, the rain jungle. They cross the rivers, and it's very, very dangerous, painful. We see those. We watch those stories in TV, and you know, it's pretty sad. Okay, but that's not the whole picture. That is not everything that happens when people leave their land. There's something more. Can we pass to the? And then I came up to this idea, to this concept of uprooting, desarraigo, which is like when you take we can imagine like a tree being uprooted and moved to other place. What happens with the trees? They sometimes suffer. They kind of like miss the place where they were planted. They sometimes die. It's not very easy to just uproot a tree or a plant, right? We know that because we do it all the time. And I think what if we people are not like the rest of the animals, but what if we are a little bit like trees? Right? Maybe, right? Why do we suffer when we, I mean, not everybody, but why do lots of people who move, who migrate, who are uprooted, suffer? Can we pass my, and I came to this image in Google, just Googling uprooting, and this is by a Spanish artist, Damian Diaz. I don't like it very much, but I think he got this idea of like people, you know, being more like plants, you know, the roots, right? And then I started thinking about this. Okay, so we are not totally animals. We can be more like plants, like trees. We miss the land. We are not nostalgic about the past. There is something organic in there, in our bodies. Okay, and I started reading more and more and more poetry, written not by journalists, not by white authors, not from white authors from Latin America, not from white authors from the US, indigenous people specifically from the Andes, the area where I was born. And I'm going to show you what they are writing about, because this is a particular experience and it's a particular way to express something that is really, really big and universal. Okay? So the first poem I'm going to show you is from a Peruvian Quechua writer called Antonio Chumbile, and it's a little story about a kid who's going to with his mom to the market. They are buying groceries. So a little kid, and the mother remembers that she needed to buy something else, and she asked the kid, "Hey, wait for me here. I'm going to buy what I am missing." So the kid is there alone in the market in this big city, Lima, and then he has a connection with his grandmother. His grandmother is in the Andes, in the mountains. And now we're going to read a little bit of this poem. I highlighted some parts. And he says, "Come on, Hippolyta," that's a grandma, "save me, steer me away from the marketplace. There, in the Andes, Ayacucho, there I can stomp dust and become lightning. I think their daddy won't be so old at 8 o'clock in the evening. There not everything moves, but everything is alive. It grows roots or goes to the sky. It grows with me and blows guainitos at dawn. Here, everything goes to me in sacks and boxes, where it becomes paper. I want land, Mama Abuela. I want to sink my feet, right? Like a tree. I want to sink my feet and harvest children in my chest, to go down to the creek, to shout your name and hear mine on my return. I want my broad made of corn, my heart made of corn. I want to grow strong. Travel the road, hard shoe, hard your hands, and go back to the market. Save them all a little bit. Save me with them." So he's basically saying he wants to go back to Ayacucho, to the Andes, to the land, because I think he feels that there he can become more powerful, he can get more energy, and then go back to Lima, to the city, and save his family, because his dad, is very old at 8 o'clock. And this reminds me a lot of my own house, because why did my dad didn't want me to go out when we just migrated to Lima? Because he was working all day long. He wasn't there, and I had like 3 sisters who were older. So that's the reason he didn't want me to go out. He wasn't there. He was just working and working and working. The other thing he says is, "I want land." Okay? So I want you to think about returning, not about nostalgia, melancholia, oh, we are sad, we miss our guainito. He wants land. He's talking about property, and we live in a material world, as Madonna said, right? He wants land, because when people move, when people migrate, they are displaced, they are dispossessed, we lose our property. Yes, that's one thing, we lose property, right? Can you imagine like living here in New York, you know, owning an apartment and then migrating and just not knowing anything about your property? Wow, that would, I mean, it hurts just thinking about it. So he's talking about land, about property, about many things, okay? Now we're in the next poem, Lourdes Aparición. She's a poet from Ayacucho, another part of the Andes, the South Andes. And in this poem, there's a woman remembering that during the Great Migration in the Andes, when she was a guaguita, you know, like a little baby, her grandfather used to like say things to her ear. Now we're going to the poem now. Okay, this is Lourdes Aparición, her book Apacheta, and she says in the poem, before reaching the seashore, where many dream of living, and it is not easy, my grandfather whispered to me in his arms while I was a baby, that life is like a rainy day, that the right path is to return, where one's roots grew, that blooming in the sea is difficult, because our roots have been pulled up to transplant. There's again the metaphor of the plant, uprooted. And it, as a person who like read literature in the academia, for me this is like gold. I mean, there are many people using the same images, the same metaphor. Wow. So this is something important to talk about. And they are not talking about the movement, about, oh, we are crossing like border, we are like, you know, they are talking about the uprooting, that specific thing. The next author is from a different part of the Andes. He's from Bolivia. He's an Aymara writer. Can we pass? He is Raimundo Quispe, and he has 2 pieces of bread because he's a novelist, but also he's a very, very nice baker. Yes, and he lives in El Alto, which is like very, very big city in Bolivia. It's the second biggest city in Bolivia. And he has this autobiographical novel called La X, where he tells the story of his family migrating from a little town to the big city of La Paz. And he, in this paragraph, he's talking about his parents looking for a place to raise their children. And this is what he says. My parents could have postponed their plans to try to survive until times improved, but they could not. A second child was on the way, and this complicated the situation of the family that grew with the fragility of a plant that sprouts on a hard soil, a soil that did not allow us to take root. That soil is the city of La Paz. Okay? In this case, people who migrated, Aymara people who migrated to La Paz and couldn't make it there, they didn't return to their original land. What they did was they found a place called El Alto and moved there. El Alto is kind of like the outskirts of La Paz, and they moved there and started to like build a new city. And 40 years later, more or less, El Alto is a huge, huge city. It's like the second biggest city in La Paz. And one important thing to say about El Alto is that it is an Aymara, an indigenous city. Okay? And that is pretty important for their identity. So when we think of indigenous people, especially in many parts in Latin America, we tend to think of indigenous people living in the rural villages, you know, around Machu Picchu, so you can take pictures of them wearing their clothes. But indigenous people in South America are building huge cities and El Alto, as they like to say, there is more close to China and Hong Kong than it is to La Paz, because there's a lot of like, the economy is very, very big. They import, export a lot of things. So that's the return in the case of Raimundo. And in the final paragraph, we will pass now. I want to introduce Daniela Catrileo. She's a Mapuche writer. Her novel Chilco actually is being translated into English. You know, the Mapuche are it's a very important indigenous nation because they were not conquered by Spanish. They were not conquered by the Incas. They were invaded actually by the modern Chilean state. But they are there, they are resisting, they are fighting for their land. And in this novel, Daniela tells a story about Mapuches who are leaving their land. And the narrator says, many fled from Chilco. Chilco is kind of like a fictional island where Mapuche lived in the novel. Many fled from Chilco, but at the same time, they were killed by melancholy. They never found their place. They had escaped impregnated in their flesh. They wrote songs, poems, through movies of this corner of the world. It was always the same thing on the lips of the Chilqueños. The lost land, the living memory, the forced migration to survive. Chilco was a crawling body, an absent womb, a missing arm. You know? So the land in this, for Daniela Catrileo, the land is really something that is part of your body. It's kind of like this, you know, your arm, your legs that are missing, and you feel it. You feel it there. Mapuches, as many indigenous cultures, when you are born, they put the placenta, you know, the womb, in the soil. So you always remember where you belong. You know? So one can start understanding, okay, where this metaphor of the plant comes from. You know, everything is like kind of like connected, right? So I want to finish by just thinking a little more about uprooting. And I say, coming back to my own personal story, sometimes I feel also like a tree that was uprooted. You know, I feel it. I feel it, and I think Santos, my friend, also felt like that. That's why he came back, right? And many of these writers are feeling it. And I think my dad also felt it. You know, during this migration from the Andes to the city, to the coast, many things happened that are not told yet. And they are said. You know, we, for example, talk about how Quechua was lost, the language, between one generation and the other. Yeah, we can say that, academics say that, but how did it happen? How was that process of losing the language? My father spoke Quechua, my mom did, my older sisters spoke Quechua, but when I came to Lima, very, very, very little, I wasn't taught Quechua. My father didn't want me to speak Quechua because of racism. There was a lot of bullying in schools, not only from students, but also teachers participated in this, I think, injection. They were putting shame in us, so we couldn't speak our language. But my dad, who didn't want me to speak Quechua, he enjoyed listening to huaynos, which is the Andean music. He enjoyed listening to huaynos at home. And I always remember, I have this image of him like putting these records, especially he liked the huaynos from the town of my mom, Chumbivilcas. He listened to it and he usually cried. But it wasn't a sad cry. It was just kind of like a connection. You know? He was crying like a connecting with the land. And the crazy thing is that when I was in Maine, my wife one day entered to my little office there when I was working. It was kind of like working, but I was watching like YouTube. Like and I was crying. She said, "What happened? No, who's dead? Who died?" I'm just listening to Buenos. But are you sad? No, I'm not sad. I'm just like, that's what my dad used to do. Okay? And I talked about this specific crime with other people. And said, wait, same thing happens to me. I talked about this with our friend Renzo Aroni, and said, yes, I do the same. And I'm not sad necessarily. You know? It just happened. And I talked about it with some friends in El Alto too. So we like to cry, and I think that is coming. That is also coming from like something that is like deep. And when I say deep, I don't want you to think, oh yeah, this is kind of like esoteric, we're talking about magical stuff. No, I'm talking about property, talking about material lost. We were displaced, we lost land, we lost property, and something inside is coming. Is calling us to go back, to return. Okay. Last thing is, there are many ways to return. Santos returned physically. My friend Raimundo Quispe, in his case, his family didn't return to the original land. They instead like built a new city, different from the past. Those are, ways to return. But thinking specifically of what happened in Peru, there are other ways to return. Some returns need to happen. And one of those is going to a place that is also inside, where we can like reconnect with what was taken from us, which is like the Quechua, and I mean the language, and there are like a lot of experiences of people like reconnecting, learning again the language, a lot of, during the pandemic, a lot of like courses online, but also like the identity, okay? Why can't we say that we are Quechua? People in my generation, especially, I told you about the shame. We couldn't say it. We don't say it. Who are you? What are you? Oh, I'm a mestizo, I'm a Peruvian, I have Inca, Spanish. That's what we say, that's what we were taught to say in school. And so among the things that were taken from us was also this capacity to connect and to say that word, Quechua, not related to the language, but related to the history, to the land. So that is another way to return. That is another return that needs to happen. Okay, and when, this is the last thing, I promise. I used to live here in Maine and in Philadelphia, but now I am in Chile. A lot of people ask me, so what are you doing in Chile? Because we Peruvians, we hate Chile, right? They took a pisco, and they won a war, so they also like are enemies. So there are many things that are very, very interesting in Chile, like the Mapuche nation, the Mapuche struggle. I am trying to like connect, to have conversations with other people that are also like dealing with different ways of returning like reclaiming the land, building a different space, a different form of indigeneity. And I am having these conversations. And I think also that when I was preparing this talk, I said to myself, so will they understand this stuff, or it's too like provincial, it's just like too, and then I said, no, that's what they told you. You were also taught to think that these things are very specific. No, only Peruvians will understand it. And no, this is universal because it is happening everywhere. It is happening in Chile, in Bolivia, in Mexico, and it's happening here in this country, right? Because what's the history in the Americas? Not in Latin America. What's the history of the land in the Americas? It's the history of displacement, the history of land grabbing, the history of how indigenous people were displaced, dispossessed, not in the colonial times, right now. No? It is happening right now. So yes, I think this is universal. And yes, I think with that I will say thank you so much for listening to me, my thoughts, and yeah, I hope we can have a conversation after. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and I will introduce again Araceli Poma, and she's going to present a song she wrote about her grandmother, and this is a fact that I found reading about Araceli. Her grandma was called Nieves, same as my own grandmother. And Araceli is also a very important advocate of the Quechua culture, fighting against the erasure of the language. Again, here, Araceli.
My grandma was a Quechua speaker, and unfortunately, she was discriminated. That's why I sing in Quechua. El canto de mi abuela lo llevo en el corazón. Evoco tu voz de fuego valiente, mujer del arte. De ahí vengo, de ahí soy. Jatucha y pata y quinita su pollo cumbi causal. Nina jaipari niquita yuyan. Yo canto para que tu voz nunca se apague, mamita. valiente mujer delante, de ahí vengo, de ahí soy. Chaipata y minijas, puyo, cumpi, causa. Dina, jaipari, chiquita, yuyani. Yo canto para que tu voz nunca se apague, mamita.
Araceli Poma.